Hello guys, I'm joined today with Casey Ruff from Boundless Body Radio. I had the pleasure of being on his channel quite a few months back now, so I thought I'd return the favour and extrapolate some of his delightful information. So you have a large platform where you interview different people, lots of different experts about health, nutrition, and fitness. So where did all that stem from? Where did it sort of derive from?
Oh man, that's a great question. So when I look back, I feel very lucky that we've been able to grow our program as much as we have. I started personal training back in 2007 and got really interested in metabolism and the ways that humans use our calories while we're exercising or while we're resting. And I did that for my career for 13 years. And then the pandemic hit. And so we lost our jobs at the big corporate gym that we were at. And so my wife and I decided that we would start our own business, which we call Boundless Body LLC. And that was basically so we could continue training the people that we were already training before and working with people on nutrition. And podcasts were always so special to me because that's how I learned about all kinds of things, low carbohydrate fasting, carnivore diets, that kind of thing. And I just decided that it would be important for me to start a podcast. I would say that I had a lot of maybe like imposter syndrome where I thought like, okay, there's so many other really great programs out there. What am I going to contribute that somebody isn't already doing really quite well? How am I going to get the same guests and all that kind of thing? But, you know, it was October of 2020 that we decided to launch Boundless Body Radio. My wife and I kind of started it together, and I to us doing like a co-host kind of a thing, but she just is too busy with her own business to be able to do it. So it kind of became my baby. And you know what it's like. You start something, you do some reps, you keep going and keep going and keep going. And before long, you've created something really special. And now we've released over 500 episodes. We make releases every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Sometimes we do bonus episodes on Saturday or Sunday. And we've talked with the most amazing people all around the world, like yourself, like Nina Teicholz, like Gary Taubes, like the Fetkeys, like so many amazing people that we've been able to host. And to see that get out into the world and grow and hopefully change some lives out there is absolutely amazing and wonderful. And I never would have imagined it would have grown to the extent that it's now.
I completely appreciate that. It's certainly a passion project for people like us. And I don't interview that many people anymore, but some of the people that you have on your channel and on your podcast are amazing speakers. And what's also important is you ask the right questions. You know, a person can only deliver as much information as what is derived from the question itself. So part of being a good interviewee is being a good interviewer, I think, in terms of the information.
Well, I agree. And thank you. It's something I always try to work on, and I've gotten better over time. I think just personal training helps you to understand how to listen to people and ask interesting questions because you're with these people, you know, maybe 2 or 3 days a week for an hour every single time. And you want to be interested in them. Obviously, you're programming for them and counting their reps and deciding what exercises and rep ranges and things like that. But personal trainers are more like therapists for people. Like we're really good friends and family with these people, and we spend so much time with them. And so I think it's really nice to be able to always be working on how to ask questions to elicit an interesting response.
Yeah, I get that completely. Now a bit about your personal fitness journey. So, I mean, did you have an interesting past before? Like, what are you doing back then? Like, long ago? And what are you doing now? Like, what's happened?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was always kind of interested in fitness as a teenager. I was kind of the chubby kid growing up, And I played ice hockey. I did cycling later on in my teenage years. In middle school, I got the book that had like all the different lifts. I bought a really inexpensive set of weights. It was lifting in my unfinished basement. And with the cycling in particular, I was using heart rate monitors as part of my training. And so I got really good at programming heart rate monitors and understanding how heart rate training worked, essentially. And it was one off season. I was studying architecture in college, and I decided to join this big corporate gym to be able to train guests. And when I joined there, I started observing some of the personal trainers, and they were working with their clients in a way that looked really fun and engaging. They were also using heart rate monitors as part of their training. And so when I went into the office to see what certification I needed to get to work there, once they brought me on staff, after a few months of me studying and passing this certification, I already knew more about heart rate monitors than anybody else on the staff. And so I was able to quickly kind of help them program the heart rate monitors and help people get like really effective training. And part of what I was trained in was a machine called a metabolic cart, which is a special machine that is like a kind of a box that's attached to a laptop. The box is then attached to an umbilical that goes to a mask that is attached to somebody. And we can do assessments, whether they're resting or whether they are doing something like a VO2 max test, where they're ramping themselves up either on a treadmill or a bike. Maybe they're running faster until they quit. And the breathing is really interesting because it tells you how many calories you're burning as you're doing different things. And so we can measure your resting metabolic rate. We can understand how many calories you're burning at certain heart rate ranges. But more than that, these assessments were able to tell us, based on the oxygen and carbon dioxide that somebody was exchanging, we could tell you not only how many calories you were burning, which is somewhat important, but we could also tell you how much fat versus how much carbohydrate you were burning. And that was really important. And we didn't really understand the power of manipulating that over time. I did learn how to do that. And basically, by shifting somebody's diet, you could help them burn increased amount of fat and decrease the amount of carbohydrates that they burn, which helps with all kinds of things. It helps with fat loss. It helps with cycling and in other endurance sports. So it was really wonderful to be able to use these metabolic carts to eventually get me into the low carbohydrate space, because after telling people for so many years that they needed a certain amount of calories, they needed to eat fruits and vegetables, they needed lots of whole grains. Now we were telling people, based on these assessments, we want you to eat fat, we want you to eat protein, and take the carbohydrates as low as possible. And that would boost not only the number of calories that you would burn, but it would also boost the amount of fat that you would burn. And again, bring down the amount of carbohydrates that somebody would burn. And so again, there were just so many benefits to that. You know, doing what we were doing before, you would have so few people get really great results. Changing what we did and giving people low carbohydrate diets, there were so few people that it didn't work for. So it was really a game changer.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I can completely appreciate the fact that our energy expenditure, the food that we give our body, you know, that's going to ultimately affect our performance. Now, since I imagine you've made a switch from like a high, you know, plant food, whole grain kind of diet to a more high fat based sort of diet, what have you noticed for yourself in terms of like maybe a few markers like fitness, maybe muscle mass, anything like that? And if you can't really talk much about that, what have you noticed with your clients?
Yeah, definitely. No, I noticed a huge benefit in my life. And it was really a progression, just like everybody else. Like learning in 2012 that we could manipulate the diet to change these metabolic rates and increase fat burning was one step. Reading The Big Fat Surprise in 2016 was another big step. I learned that fat is okay, protein is good for you, not necessarily a low carbohydrate diet at that time, but at least we could eat fat and it's healthy with protein. Later on, we were doing weight loss contests and we were learning that low carbohydrate diets work for our clients really well. And we just gave people low carbohydrate meal plans for the meal plans we were giving them as part of the corporate gym. And then I decided to try a carnivore diet in April of 2019. I was finally convinced that I could do it without killing myself, and I just wanted to try it for 1 month. And yes, I did lose a little bit of fat that I didn't think I had to lose. It was easy for me to maintain muscle. It was really easy for me to have great energy and not have snacks in between clients. I had been low carb and keto for a very long time at that point, maybe 2 or 3 years. So I'd already experienced a little bit of that benefit. But it really was about 2 weeks into my carnivore journey when I realized that my anxiety and stress kind of dropped out. And I started to experience this like really unique kind of calmness where things wouldn't bother me as much as they used to. And I don't have mental disorders or anything, diagnosed, but I definitely have a high amount of anxiety. My brain just kind of tends to spin around and all these things that will never, ever happen. And it dropped out. And so when May first started, I decided to continue doing it. And that was 4.5 years now. And so I still notice all the same benefits. I'm able to think very clearly. I wake up early after not too much sleep. I sleep really efficiently. I spend every night in a sauna, which really helps my sleep. And I just feel good all day, every day. And to contrast, like what I'm going to do after this appointment, I'm going to go on a bike ride. I'm not even going to bring a water bottle. I'm going to be fasted. I don't know how long I'm going to go, maybe hour and a half. It's just not a question of whether I have to be like eating or snacking or doing something before or during being on the bike. You just grab your bike and go. To contrast that with what I was doing before 10 years ago, where you have to eat all the oatmeal and the bananas and like all the sports products and all the stuff you had to consume while you're doing bodybuilding in the conventional way. To not have to do that now is amazing.
I completely understand that. Yeah, I mean, I'm not quite yet where you're at right now just because I have to eat so much food. But I imagine for like the average person or average sort of gym goer, the fitness sort of professionals out there, they really don't have to overthink it anymore. Like you just said, just have a sip of water now. Okay, you might not drink again for another hour or two, maybe 3 hours. But I have the same experience. I don't drink nearly as much. There's a lot less thought process that goes on, which is bizarre, because you hear all these like dietary guidelines, like, 6 to 8 cups of water a day, 5 a day, limit your red meat intake, but that doesn't hold true to what we seem to find most beneficial to us as athletic kind of people. Now I've got a question.
When input reduces.
Yeah, completely. I've got the question here about different dietary approaches. Now, imagine like myself, you've probably been through maybe like keto, paleo, carnivore, all the different things. What would you say was like a fair way to kind of level up, and what percentage benefit does each level give? So if it was, say, paleo, so more like whole food based, would you say that's giving you 50% benefit, or is it, carnivore all the way?
Will you re-ask the question? It just time.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, most of us have all tried like paleo, keto, and carnivore sort of diets. What kind of percentage difference would you say each of those made, assuming carnivore is like your optimal diet, I imagine?
That's a great question. I don't think I've ever thought about it in that context. I guess the normal progression for most of us is you start with the standard American diet, which we shared with everybody around the world. So you're welcome, Jonathan, in the UK. And you feel terrible, right? And so you want to do something. So maybe you try vegetarian or vegan or paleo, and you start to feel maybe just a little bit better. So maybe that's like the jump from, I don't know, you feel terrible to maybe you feel like 50%. That's definitely something. You're feeling better. You feel more full, better energy. Then maybe you discover low carbohydrate and eventually keto. And that's a good step. Maybe that's another like 20%. Like, wow, I'm able to lose weight. My mental clarity's there. I'm eating fat bombs, and I'm adding a little bit of butter to my coffee and things like that. And I think that's fine. It is a significant jump from low carbohydrate to carnivore for me. I think that's where all the weird things happen that you don't expect. Like, yeah, maybe people lost some weight on keto, but they lose the rest of the weight on carnivore. They like Stephen Thomas talks about, like he always used to have athlete's foot. He doesn't have athlete's foot anymore. My shoulder used to always hurt poke checking in hockey. That has not happened in 4.5 years since being carnivore. My skin is perfectly tan. Like, dude, I'm a ginger. I used to burn in the moonlight. Now, like, I spend all day, every day outside with zero, any kind of like sunscreen, and I feel amazing. All of these weird things start to change when you optimize. And I just often reflect on the fact that when we changed our diets and had recommendations back in the 1950s and 1960s, and we told people the fat and cholesterol was bad, we were only really doing that for one reason, which was for heart attacks. Middle-aged men started dying of heart attacks out of nowhere. So we came up with this idea that if we lowered the fat and lowered the cholesterol, then we'd solve this problem of heart attacks. And look what's happened 60 years later. We didn't even solve the one problem that we were trying to fix. And now we have myriad other problems like obesity and diabetes and all these other crazy things that we did not have back then when we were only trying to fix that one thing. Carnivore is like the opposite of all of that. There is one species appropriate diet. And if you eat that diet, everything will optimize. You'll think better. Your sexual function will be better. You'll be able to add muscle. You can burn off fat, and all the weird little health niggles that everybody complains about when they get dad bod or they're aging and all that stuff. Like, that just seems to magically like go away. It's really an incredible lifestyle, and it really is a species appropriate diet. I truly believe that.
I've had the same experience myself. This kind of brings to our next question, which is, I'll give you a moment to think about this one because it's quite a tricky one to answer in a very simple sort of way. But if you had someone just come off the street to you on a standard Western diet, like an average office worker, say, and they said, "Hey, Casey, I want to improve my diet. What would I do?" Then contrast to that, what fitness might they do? So perhaps if you had to give people one simple answer, I would do this and I would do this exercise, what would it be?
Yeah, I don't have to think about that at all. The first thing I would say is move towards eating more animal proteins. Start with that. Get more animal products in your diet, more of the protein and the fat together, the way nature made it for us. Move in that direction and see what happens. If you start to feel better, then start to eliminate some of the plants and see how that goes. As far as movement goes, there's two things I really recommend. The first thing is just to move. Find whatever way to move that you really enjoy, whether that's walking, riding a bike, paddleboarding, whatever you like that you can do at a low level, and just go do it. Do it as much as you possibly can. Find ways to be creative and do it more in your day. So like if you have a meeting that you're taking a call, take the call outside, go on a little walk around the neighborhood. Like there's so many opportunities that we have to include more movement in our day. So that would be the first thing. The second thing would be strength training. I really, really, really want people to do some form of resistance training. And I believe it's really important that people get very close to what most people call like muscle failure, like pushing yourself to an intensity where you can't really do like a perfect rep anymore and stopping there. You can move slowly. You can use machines. There's so many different ways that you can do it. You can use a gym, or you can buy bands on Amazon for $30. Or you can use stuff around your house. Like there's ways for you to move against resistance. And I think it's the best thing that you can do. But I think especially if somebody at least has like a beginner level of doing these types of workouts, over time, I want them to push closer and closer to like muscle failure, basically.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, I'm in complete agreement. You know, it's all about phasing in the stuff that we know works. And I've got a slightly different question here. People are often demotivated when they sort of start on their fitness journey, their health journey. They sort of, maybe they don't see much results. They're not got the weight loss they're hoping for. Maybe they're not getting stronger. Maybe they're not improving their lap times or something. What kind of key advice would you give to them, like to stay motivated? Is there any kind of tips you'd give them?
Great question. I think it depends on what the person's goals are and what you're using to measure the way that you're getting to those goals. So I think for most people, they're really fixated on the scale, which, especially with a carnivore diet, is not going to tell you that much. A carnivore diet is a healing diet, and you are eating the most healing, amazing foods you can possibly get, and your body's going to be rebuilding itself. You may gain a tremendous amount of weight in the beginning. You might gain 10, 15, 20 pounds as your body's healing, building up its bones and the connective tissue and the muscle mass and all that stuff. So I think a scale is a poor indicator of whether somebody's going to get to their health goals doing a low carbohydrate, ketogenic, or carnivore diet. I think using something like a string around the midsection, or taking some very simple pictures from the front, from the side, from the back. Don't share them with anybody, but at least take some pictures in the beginning of your journey, because that can be more motivating to see like, oh, wow, the scale didn't change, or maybe it even went up. But when I'm comparing where I was 2 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, 3 months ago, whatever it is, to where you are now, you're going to see a vast difference. And so I think it depends on what somebody's goals are. I think a lot of times we set the wrong metrics that don't necessarily get us to our goals. And so we as coaches should be really thoughtful about the ways that we're validating how our clients are doing. And it's also up to us to really convince people that they need to be patient. If they're not there yet, remind them that it took them a long time to get them to where they are today. And so it's going to take a while. And it's not really about a finish line. It's not about this event or getting to this weight. Like there's never an end. We're always on this journey. And just to have that mindset and just say like, look, I'm just going to chip away at this every single day and be really consistent. I think people can get tremendous results that way.
Yeah, I completely agree. Would it be fair to say that sometimes online we'll see different programs advertised as like, oh, gain an inch in your arms in a month, or, you know, lose 20 pounds by eating this one food? Would they be examples of people that you might try to stay clear of? And in contrast to that, are there any sort of people, besides maybe myself and a few others, that you'd sort of gravitate towards for solid advice around, you know, fitness, body composition, stuff like that?
Yeah, that's another really good question. I generally try to steer clear of social media kind of influencers. Nothing wrong with them, but if you're creating cookie cutter programs that promise a big result in a short amount of time, that's really kind of snake oil to me. That really repels me, I guess. I think the best coaches ask a lot of questions, offer intakes. They listen to people. They really seek to get to the root cause of issues and really help what their goals are. Right? The trainer that I know locally, that it always seems like he's putting his clients through whatever he himself is doing at the time, or whatever his clients' goals are. And it can be very frustrating because they feel like they're not like listened to. And so, yeah, I like to find the coaches that questions and design individualized programs. As a trainer who's been in this business for a long time, I'm thinking of ways that I can try to make something that I could, you know, monetize that adds like a tremendous amount of value to people that I can feel really good about. I haven't gotten there yet. I don't know how to do that. And so I don't know what that's going to look like, if anything. And so I do choose I try to choose the coaches that are more mindful, that listen and really try to individualize programs for people.
Yes, completely. It's always tough when the market is so densely populated with lots of different people. And what I often see nowadays is people will charge extraordinary amounts for something which is very generic and cookie cutter, like you mentioned. And I kind of look at that and think, well, yes, person X has a big following, a lot of Instagram followers, whatever it is. But it doesn't necessarily mean that what they're giving you is the most useful and beneficial for you. So I think emphasizing like appropriate goal setting and kind of showing people this is what you need to do. And I think a lot of programs aren't necessarily built around a set guideline or plan itself, but it's all about the principles that underpin them. So like you said earlier about like, getting your steps in, doing some movement, doing effective training, going close to failure, stuff like that. I think they're all quite sound sort of methodologies. Now, how does your kind of training look like now, Casey? What do you do and what are your goals to kind of go around that?
Well, yeah, that's a really good point. And my current goals really, I'm not training for anything specific. So I'm just trying to maintain for now. I'll lift maybe once or twice a week. My lifting sessions are really no more than about 15 to 20 minutes. If I was trying to add muscle, I would probably be training a lot more than that, but I'm just trying to maintain at this point. And so whether that's going into my community center down the road, or whether that's grabbing some bands and just going to a park and throwing them around a jungle gym or something and doing some rows and chest presses or whatever, that I'll kind of do that. Everything else is movement. And so I seek to get about 20,000 steps a day. And when I'm out walking, I try to do some business. I try to do my calls. I'm preparing for a podcast that I'm doing. So that would be a big thing. And then other things are just the activities that I love to do. Like I love to paddleboard at the lake by my house. I like to cycle, like I mentioned. I love playing ice hockey still to this day. So I like to mix those up as well. In general, just trying to be outside as much as possible and active as much as I like has been a great kind of pair to a carnivore diet that allows me to have all of that energy to be able to do that and be able to do whatever I like basically every day.
I like that. Yeah, as like a fellow online coach, if it were, I do notice that a lot of people are like glued to the phones and they're doing everything indoors. And I think sometimes I might just do a workout. I mean, I have quite a few gyms I can access, but I'll do a workout sometimes with my body weight outside, grounded on the grass. And I quite enjoy that. And it might take me 20 minutes or something, but it's plenty good enough, so it kind of says if I can do it and you can do it, Casey, why can't anyone else? Now, on that note, if there was like kind of a guideline of a few exercises you might recommend to someone, so they've got no equipment, no bands, they've got basically a house, a wall, and a flat surface basically to stand on, maybe. What would you recommend to them as like a little program? Perhaps they're an office worker or something, Yeah,
that is a good question. That could be a little bit challenging because some of my favorite moves, you might need to have something. I guess I would recommend like a deadlift movement. You would need to have something to kind of pick up, and you would want to make sure that you're doing that movement really safely. You could do a squat. You could do squats with body weight. The software program that I have that I got during the pandemic that allows me to program workouts for people based on the equipment that they have available. I can even filter it down to water bottles. And so people can fill up water bottles and maybe like a shoulder press or a chest press or something, just really simple. I want people to prioritize the compound lifts and the lifts that strengthen the center part of the body. Those are the ones that are going to give you the biggest bang for the buck. We have the most muscle tissue in that areas. So pushing in the lower body, like a squat, pulling in the lower body, like a deadlift, a chest press, a row, I think is super, super important. If people could find a way to do that. So it's those types of movements that I like to recommend. We can be really creative with people if they don't have a full gym. I will say though, like literally the bands that I got from Amazon was $30. You can do everything with that. And I would really encourage people to at least think about purchasing some bands and maybe like something that can go in the door to anchor those down. You can get all of that for less than $40. I mean, that's pretty inexpensive. So there are things that you can do. A few tools will expand your library by so many different exercises. I would encourage people to think about that as well.
I completely agree. Yeah. Part of it is education as well. Like you said about the sort of the key compound movements. You just have to watch people that train. There are some people online that do actually put out quite good training footage. You can look at that, look at their form. The instructions usually quite useful. It's funny you mentioned about like lockdowns and things. And I remember going back in time a few years ago, I was doing exactly what you're saying with like giant gallon jugs of like soap or whatever, but I just filling out with water and sand and stuff. Was there any sort of funny things you did back then to sort of get around, perhaps if you didn't have a gym, maybe?
Oh man. I mean, it was just so bizarre to be working in a large corporate gym that had access to everything. The place was huge. To all of a sudden, we're working with clients. I worked with clients on the banister of their stairs, outside on trees. Like, we were lucky that we had some portable equipment in the beginning. And so we were able to leverage that. And so even just hanging up like a TRX band and getting really creative with that. Or, we did have a few of those resistance bands that we could hook up to different apparatus. But yeah, the number of trees and parks and again, banisters of stairs that I've trained people on is a little bit weird. And even to this day, there's so many people that could go back to the gym, but they now have created with whatever equipment they have a pretty nice setup that has enough equipment for them. And we just work with that. And it's, a little bit limiting as far as the exercise you can do, but it's not limiting as far as the results you can get. You can get amazing results by doing those fundamental lifts in whatever way that somebody can with whatever equipment they have. So yeah, personally, we had a little bit of equipment enough to keep me interested during the pandemic, but it was more with the clients that became like really kind of weird and interesting. And like the number of my clients' cats and dogs, like I learned and met and all that stuff and still know to this day is kind of funny.
Yeah, I like that. My partner Sophie, she's a mother of two little ones, so not sort of little ones you can just leave off on their own sort of thing. And yeah, she actually recently sold her Smith machine setup and most of her weights. Now she just works out in the living room with the girls sat there, watching her taking part sometimes. And it works. She doesn't have equipment. She has maybe some bands and a set of dumbbells, but like you said, $30, $40, you're set pretty much. You don't need this extra stuff. It's, all this extra stuff, guys, I think it really only comes down to needing it or a necessity when you're sort of a top bodybuilder trying to build a lot more muscle. Then you might have to add some intensity and some load in that kind of sense. But brilliant. So where can people find you, Casey, if you want to be found?
Yeah, absolutely. Always want to be found. Always fun to chat with people all over the world. So the best place to find us is myboundlessbody.com. That's our website that has access to all of our social media. The podcast will be there so people can click on that and see all the different episodes that we've done, including the one with you. That's where they can link up our YouTube, our Facebook, and all that other stuff. I very rarely write a blog. I'm very inconsistent with it, but they can find that there too. More than anything, though, the first thing that people will see when they go to our website is a book now button where people can click and schedule a complimentary 30-minute session with us at any time. And we would love to just chat with people all over the place so we can talk to them about diet or workouts or anything they like, even if it's just to introduce themselves. It's fun to meet people, like I said. So again, that is myboundlessbody.com.
Perfect. Thanks very much. I'll link those below in the show notes. And appreciate your time. That's been action-packed. Come on, guys. 30 minutes, all that information. You got your money's worth there.
I talk fast. I talk way too fast.
Brilliant. Cheers, Casey.